The movie begins in a small diner where a man named Joseph is waiting for his sister Sydney. The two of them have just stolen $7 million. It's never clearly shown whether they robbed a bank or something else, but now they need a place to hide. Sydney had no choice. She was deep in debt and wanted to give her daughter Stephanie a better life. Joseph had already planned everything. He had met a woman who owned an old house in a quiet village. That house had been empty for years, making it the perfect hiding spot. The plan was simple: lay low for a few days, wait for things to settle, and then return to their normal lives with all the money. As they were discussing their next move, the sound of police sirens suddenly filled the air. Without wasting a second, Joseph and Sydney rushed out of the diner and ran towards a nearby forest. They knew they had to cover their tracks. Once inside the woods, they quickly changed into new clothes and threw away their old belongings into a pond. Both of them were carrying guns, just in case. Joseph and Sydney started walking towards the house. Sydney trusted her brother completely, believing that he had planned everything carefully. As they moved through the vast open field, an unexpected gunshot echoed in the distance. Both of them stopped for a moment, looking around cautiously. They didn't see anyone nearby, so they continued forward. When they finally reached the house, they noticed something strange. 3 young men were already there, messing around, laughing, and aiming their guns at random targets. It seemed like they were just having fun, unaware of who the house actually belonged to. Sydney, without hesitation, pulled out her gun and stepped forward. "Leave now," she ordered. The boys, however, didn't seem scared. They looked at each other and smirked, as if daring her to do something. But just as Joseph appeared from the other side of the house, his presence alone was enough to change everything. Without saying a word, the boys suddenly panicked and ran away. Joseph turned to Sydney. "We should get inside now." They entered the house quickly and shut the door behind them. The place was in terrible condition. Dust covered every surface, and broken furniture lay scattered across the floor. It was obvious that no one had lived there for a long time, but there was something else. Something Joseph knew that Sydney didn't. The woman who had given him the house had told him a strange secret. This wasn't just an ordinary, abandoned house. It had a unique ability, one that defied all logic. It could bend time and space, transporting people across different realities. Joseph didn't fully understand how it worked, but he believed that if they stayed here for a while, it might somehow erase their tracks, making it impossible for anyone to find them. However, there were rules he had to follow. He had been given clear instructions. Inside the house, there were 2 old clocks, both covered in dust yet still ticking. Their time had to be set precisely as instructed. If not, the house's mysterious power might not work as intended. Just then, the sound of police sirens filled the air. Panicked, Sydney urged Joseph to run, but he remained calm. "We need to go to the basement," he said. "The door will only open with the right clock combination." Moving quickly, they adjusted the clocks as instructed. As soon as the basement door unlocked, they rushed inside, just as it seemed the police had entered the house. Hiding in the darkness, Joseph pulled out an old diary and handed it to Sydney. He told her to dial a specific number on the antique telephone. She did as he said, speaking a strange word, possibly a code. Suddenly, everything went dark. The sirens, the footsteps, everything vanished. When they emerged from the basement, they were stunned. The entire house had changed. It was no longer abandoned. The furniture was neatly arranged, and the place looked lived in. Joseph, following the diary's instructions, adjusted a clock in the living room and restarted it. Sydney was in disbelief. How could this be real? But one thing was clear. Whoever sent them here had never dared to come themselves. That meant there was more to this house than they knew. Joseph assured her they were now safe, but only under one condition. They had to stay in the house for exactly 14 days. After that, they would return to their timeline, where everything would be back to normal. Joseph and Sydney were relieved, believing no one would find them here. The house seemed prepared for them. The kitchen was stocked with food, and old records and movies were left on the table. With nothing to do, they spent their first day simply resting. The next morning, Joseph decided to explore the surroundings, but stayed close, knowing there was an invisible boundary they couldn't cross. Something he had been warned about. Meanwhile, Sydney searched the house and found clothes. The household items were peculiar, a mix of both old-fashioned and modern things, but they didn't dwell on it. Their only goal was to stay hidden. As evening came, they cooked a meal together and later counted their stolen money, keeping careful records. Sydney, holding a picture of her daughter, reassured herself that everything would be fine. Days passed uneventfully. 13 days went by. On their final night, they talked about an antique object in the house before the conversation shifted to their past. It became clear that their lives had not been easy. Joseph regretted not being there for Sydney during her struggles, but now at least he was by her side. They reminisced reminisced about their parents, and Sydney recalled a tune from her childhood, the song their mother used to love. Finally, the 2 weeks were over. Excitement filled the air. They were ready to leave. Sydney especially was eager to return to her daughter. Joseph and Sydney began cleaning the house, preparing to leave. Joseph burned all the trash, making sure no trace was left behind. Just as they had followed specific instructions to enter this alternate timeline, they now had a set of steps to return to their own. But something was wrong. When they reached the basement, they were shocked to find the door locked from the outside. Someone had sealed it. They noticed a message scratched into the wood, along with an old letter. It read, "If you want to go back, go to the old mill." Sydney immediately panicked. Without hesitation, she ran toward the mill, ignoring Joseph's calls to wait. He chased after her, trying to calm her down. When they stepped inside, they were stunned. The mill was not abandoned as they expected. It had once been set up as a church, filled with worn-out pews and religious symbols. But that wasn't the worst part. Near the center of the room lay a decaying corpse. The body was slumped near a wooden stand, its condition so bad that it was unrecognizable. On the stand, a message was carved into the wood. "You are trapped in a time loop. If you accept your fate, sign below." Sydney's hands trembled as she read the words. Fear gripped her. She refused to believe this was real. Without a second thought, she turned and ran. But as she reached the boundary of the house's strange limits, something horrifying happened. She couldn't leave. The moment she tried to cross, her body convulsed violently, and she began vomiting blood. Her vision blurred, and before she could understand what was happening, she collapsed. When she regained consciousness, she was back inside the house. Joseph sat beside her, his face tense with worry. He had carried her inside. Both of them realized that they cannot escape from this place. When Sydney regains consciousness, she gets furious and starts shouting. After escaping one problem, they have now landed in another, which frustrates her even more. Her anger intensifies when Joseph reveals a shocking truth. The dead body they found belonged to the same woman who had given him this house. They understand there is no way out. Joseph decides to sign a document, and the moment he writes his name, a safe suddenly appears. Using an old diary, he enters the code to unlock it. Inside, they find a tape recorder and a small note. The note instructs them to say something aloud, then close the safe, as their words will create a connection. Curious, Joseph opens the safe, says hello, and then closes it. A minute later, when he plays the tape recorder, an unfamiliar voice speaks. The voice warns Joseph that he shouldn't be there. Strangely, this person seems to know everything about them, their situation, the money, and their attempt to escape. Sydney tries to negotiate, assuming these people want a share of the money. She is even willing to give it up if it means they can leave. However, the mysterious voice has no interest in the money. Joseph starts to suspect that the voice belongs to someone from the future or an alternate world. But no matter who it is, one thing is clear: they are trapped with no way out. Sydney opens the safe again, and this time, the voice gives them a chilling ultimatum. To escape alive, they must kill someone. Shocked, Joseph asks who, and the voice explains that an unknown person will arrive, and they must eliminate him completely, erasing all evidence. Only then can they return to their timeline. The voice reveals they could track Joseph and Sydney, but not this stranger, as he entered from an unknown timeline. If they fail, their existence will be erased. With no idea when this person will arrive, Sydney and Joseph return inside and prepare for the worst. They hide weapons around the house and take turns keeping watch, ready for an attack. Months pass, but no one comes. They remain trapped, unable to leave. The only strange comfort is that the house is stuck in a loop. Whenever the fridge empties, closing and reopening, it refills it with fresh food. Sydney and Joseph began to suspect that the people they were communicating with controlled the house and that a major experiment was taking place there. One day, Sydney decided to dig into the history of the house. After looking through old documents and photographs, she made a shocking discovery. None of the items belonged to a single owner. Everything seemed to be collected from different times. Even stranger, there was no record of an owner after 1955. Joseph was furious. He felt like they were being used as test subjects in a secret experiment. For months, he had tried to reach out to the people behind the voice but got no response. Every day, he would go to the mill, listening to the tape recorder, hoping to hear something, but there was only silence. Then one night, while Sydney was keeping watch outside, an unknown person appeared. Hiding in the distance, he watched her through binoculars, preparing to shoot. At the last moment, Joseph spotted him and shouted, alerting Sydney. She reacted quickly, running toward the house just as the attacker fired, causing him to miss. A struggle broke out, and in the chaos, the unknown man injured Joseph and dragged him to the mill. He didn't say a word, but it was clear he wanted Joseph to lie to the people controlling the house. When they finally contacted Joseph for confirmation, he told them there had been too much fog and he couldn't find the stranger's body. However, they already suspected something. Sydney had been at home when it happened, and they had contacted her separately. A new safe appeared inside the house, and Sydney received received a direct message. The voice told her they had no idea who the attacker was. He was neither Joseph nor Sydney, nor was he a future version of them or anyone related to them. But one thing was clear: they had to kill him. Moments later, the unknown man entered the house and Sydney confronted him. A fight broke out, and in the struggle, she managed to pull off his mask. What she saw left her frozen in shock. It was her daughter, Stephanie. Just then, Joseph arrived, unaware of what Sydney had just seen. Before Stephanie could be exposed, she quickly hid her face. Sydney, desperate to stop Joseph, tried to tell him something, but before she could, he raised his gun and fired. At the last second, Sydney threw herself in front of the bullet to protect her daughter. She collapsed, wounded and dying, unable to reveal the truth to Joseph. Stephanie took the opportunity to escape, vanishing into the darkness, while Joseph stood over Sydney, unaware of what had just happened. Joseph was devastated by Sydney's death. Grief-stricken, he buried her body, but the pain of his mistake consumed him. Desperate for a second chance, he contacted the mysterious people controlling the house and begged them to send him back in time. He pleaded for one last opportunity to make things right. Surprisingly, they agreed. Joseph was sent back to the moment when he and Sydney first arrived at the house with the stolen money. However, to change the course of events, he did something drastic. He killed his past self, taking his own place in the timeline. This allowed him to bring Sydney back, believing he could finally save her. But no matter how many times he tried, fate remained unchanged. Again and again, he accidentally killed Sydney. This tragic cycle repeated itself countless times, each attempt ending in failure. In the final scene of the film, we see an older Joseph sitting in the diner, waiting. Sydney arrives, but she doesn't recognize him. He reveals the painful truth. He has spent a lifetime trying to save her, but every time, he ends up killing her by mistake. Now, there is only one way to break the cycle. He tells Sydney she must kill him, leave the money behind, return to her daughter, and never go to that house again. With no other option, he forces Sydney's hand, and she shoots him. As the sirens wail in the background, Sydney panics and runs away, just as Joseph feared. This means the cycle will repeat once again. She will still end up at that house, trapped in the same loop. The film leaves many questions unanswered. How did Sydney's daughter Stephanie end up there? Did she come searching for her parents? Or did Joseph or Sydney bring her in another timeline? The mysterious house, seemingly controlled by humans, had been the site of experiments since 1955. The scattered objects from different eras hinted that others had lived there before, or perhaps versions of Joseph and Sydney existed in multiple timelines. Like many time travel films, Things Will Be Different remains deliberately confusing, but that's part of its mystery. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like the video, and if you're new to the channel, subscribe. See you in the next story.